I am Paul Normandin. I am a storyteller, and I would love to tell you this story. I was born about 50 years ago, and I was born the first son of a firstborn son into a French-Canadian family. Now, they had moved to Providence, Rhode Island, and they were wonderful, and they only spoke French in their house, and they were Mime and Pipe. And these grandparents of mine were some of the nicest people I have ever met in my life. And TV must have been crap back then or something, because these guys thought I was the greatest thing ever. And so every single Friday, the minute my mom would let them do it, they would pick me up and take me to their house for the entire weekend. Now, during this time, I got two sisters. I'm not sure if that's related, but I'm pretty sure that my parents were excited that somebody wanted to have me. And so I went over to this wonderful family's house. I learned to speak French, and every Saturday morning, my grandmother would wake me up, and she'd have this little crown, and she'd put it on my head, and she would proclaim me king for the day. If anybody ever tells you royalty sucks, they're lying to you. This was the most wonderful time. I would say, I want pancakes for breakfast, and I would have pancakes. I'd say, let's go to the amusement park. We'd go to the amusement park. And then I turned 6 years old, and my dad got this great job in NASA, and I found myself in Florida, and Grandma and Grandpa, Mime and Pepe, were nowhere to be seen. And I turned to my mom and dad, and I said, what about king for a day? And when they stopped laughing, I stopped asking. So sure enough, we moved to Cape Canaveral, Florida. And my dad had this great job with NASA, and I saw rockets go up, and it was lovely. And after about 6 years of that and having absolutely no family support, my dad got another job. We moved to Houston, Texas. And it was lovely until the last day of school when my dad loaded us all in the car and drove us all to Rhode Island. It was kind of one of those crazy things that happens in your life, and you go, is this normal? And I found myself in Rhode Island with people I didn't, really know. I knew them when I was 6, but now I was 13, and holy crap, what's going on? And sure enough, all the family took us in. We'd bounce from family to family. But there was Mime and Pipe. They remembered me. And Pipe, he would come find me. He'd find me about 11 o'clock in the morning. And he would load me in his car. And he taught me something very, very valuable. He taught me baseball. Now, he didn't take me to pitch. He didn't teach me to hit. He took me to Fenway Park in Boston. And over the course of 3 months, I saw 20 games. Now, if you're familiar with baseball, that's a lot of games in one season. And this was the summer of 1975. It was a good season to be in Fenway Park. At the end of that lovely, wonderful time when I had watched all these baseball games with my grandpa, there were other relatives, I don't remember them, but Grandpa and Grandma I remember. Dad showed up, loaded me back in the car. We drove back to Houston. The good news was I got to keep watching the Red Sox because they made it all the way through the playoffs into the World Series. And in the World Series, they went all the way to Game 7. And I was calling Grandpa after every game. And after Game 7, we were very sad. And then in the off season, we got more sad. My Mime passed away. And I think there was an understanding at that time that as a child, you don't appreciate everything that's going on, but even as adults, sometimes we feel that tragedy and those horrible things that happen to us, and they weigh down on us, and we feel terrible. And I felt terrible. And I couldn't go to the funeral because it cost too much to go back to Rhode Island. But that summer, in July 1976, Grandpa was able to do something he would never have been able to do before. He got on an airplane by himself for the first time in his life, and he flew halfway across the country to Houston, Texas. And when he landed, he looked at me, And he said, "I understand the National League plays here." And of course, he was right. The National League did play. And the National League, well, they had the Astros. And so on July 9th, 1976, Grandpa was very excited. And one of the reasons was he was from a little town near Quebec. There's Lake Normandin up there, if you're familiar with it. They don't pronounce it like that. And they were playing the Montreal Expos that night. And that meant they were going to play the Canadian national anthem. And so we piled in the car, and we went to get to the game, and Grandpa learned what Houston traffic was. And we got to the game at the last minute. We were trying to find the ticket booth, and one of the guys who takes your ticket gave Grandpa 2 seats. And Grandpa was a little, I don't want to take, and he took them eventually, and we went in, and they were on the 7th row on the first base line, right above the dugout on the aisle. Now, as I'm telling you this, I remember it perfectly. And I remember that game. And I remember singing both national anthems that day. And I remember Grandpa singing in French. And I remember in the 4th inning when one of the Astros hit a home run on an even-numbered minute. That homer was not called a homer. Anybody know what that's called? It was called a foamer. Because they were so desperate to get people in the stadium, they gave away free beer if you hit a home run on an even-numbered minute. So let me recap. It's 105 degrees outside. Grandpa is inside. There is live baseball going on. He is watching it, and they're giving him free beer. And it's the National League. He's going, "This is great. Why didn't I come over to this side before?" So sure enough, a couple of guys in the break between the top of the 5th and the bottom of the 5th leave their front row seats. And they give the tickets to us. It's just like one of these nights. And Grandpa takes the tickets, and we scurry on down to the first row. And Larry Durker's the pitcher that night, and he's batting, because that's what they do in the National League. And he fouls one off. Now, my grandpa had been to a lot of games, but he had never caught a baseball. And when that ball landed in our new seats, and Grandpa just held up his hand, and it just fell in it, you would have thought he would have jumped up and down. He just handed me the ball. Now, I was only 14, but I had a feeling that was important. At 50, I know what that meant. And later on, when Larry Durker had not allowed a hit, there were 2 outs in the top of the 9th, and he threw his final pitch. I was standing at the point of action with my grandfather and the baseball. And I saw the grounder go up the line, and Bob Watson was playing first, and he fielded the ball. Now, it was a pretty fast ball. And Larry Durker may have been at the end of his career, but that man never ran faster in his entire life because he was already on the bag. Now, I could hear Larry Durker yelling to Bob Watson, the first baseman, "Throw me the ball." Now, Watson's played first base his whole life. He sees what's happening here. He's got the runner beat. And Durker yells again, "Throw me the ball." Keeps running in. He tags the bag. I can't hear anything anymore. And Larry Durker, I see his mouth and his arms. He's still screaming. When Watson picks up Durker and the rest of the team collapses on him. I'm holding that ball, and I look over at my grandfather, and I realize it was his turn to be king for the day. Thank you all.